Conversation webinars. I hope you enjoyed the first one last week with President Masood Khan. It's still online if you haven't seen it yet, so don't despair. Anyway, I'm Andrew Gwynne MP and I'm the chair of Labour Friends of Kashmir, a newly established group of parliamentarians, members and supporters from across the British Labour Party and the Labour movement who are committed to finding a peaceful resolution to the Kashmir issue. As I said last week, I hope that in these webinars that we can interview key players and interested parties in the Kashmir debate to discuss the background to the issue, draw out the different strands of opinion, and hopefully in future webinars to debate a way forward to bring sides together. Now, let me express from the outset, and it's very important that I do so, that Labour Friends of Kashmir is not a voice piece for one side of the debate or another. Fundamentally, we are drawn from across the Labour family, and members hold different views on sovereignty, and many of our members and supporters have heritage from one side of the line of control or another. In these webinars, we will challenge and we will listen to the various viewpoints, pro-India, pro-Pakistan, pro-Kashmiri independence, in order to understand the entirety of the issue and to bring all of these differences together towards some meaningful dialogue. But as before, and hopefully the technology won't let me down this week, we want these webinars not just to be an interview with special guests, but to be a bit of an interactive forum. Please put your questions to Labour Friends of Kashmir via the method shown on the screen, and I'll hopefully be able to put some of them to our guest later. Now, we are very privileged this evening to have as our guest Mr. Shehryar Khan Afridi, member of the National Assembly. Before entering politics, of course, he played first-class cricket in Pakistan. He was a member of the 14th National Assembly between 2013 and May 2018, and he was re-elected to the 15th National Assembly, taking his seat in August 2018. Back in 2013, he competed in the elections for the Speaker of the National Assembly from Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, PTI. He's a member of Parliamentarians Without Borders. He has been a champion of Gavi Alliance from 2014 onwards. In 2018, he was appointed by Imran Khan as Minister of State for the Interior. And in 2019, he was appointed simultaneously to hold the portfolio of Minister of State for Narcotics Control and of the States and Frontier Regions. He currently holds the important portfolio of Chairman of the Parliamentary Special Committee on Kashmir within the National Assembly of Pakistan, with the status of Federal Minister in that post. Welcome. Now, before we start the discussion on Kashmir, it is worth mentioning, of course, that today, the 16th of December, is the 6th anniversary when 6 gunmen affiliated to Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan conducted a terrorist attack on the Army Public School in the northwestern Pakistani city of Peshawar. The militants, all of whom were foreign nationals, comprising 1 Chechen, 3 Arabs and 2 Afghans, entered the school and opened fire on school staff and children, killing 149 people, including 132 school children, ranging between the ages of 8 and 18 years old. Mr. Afridi, I'm sure you will want to make a brief response, but it serves as a poignant reminder that Pakistan is also tied into the battle against international terrorism and such awful events, and we still send our deepest condolences to the families and friends of all those that were brutally murdered 6 years ago.
Thank you, Mr. Andrew, for having me in your show. Yes, today, every Pakistani, every parent, and a normal human cannot forget what we have witnessed in 2014. Our children, especially teachers and parents and our baseline was targeted as a nation. And Mr. Andrew, if I tell you that what we have witnessed, it's not only related to APS, religious schools were targeted. Every single key symbol of our culture was one way or the other affected. And I, as a proud Pakistani, we are a resilient nation. Hats off to our armed forces, civil armed forces, to the entire nation, because the way we have been fighting it out, it is now known to the entire globe. And as a resilient nation, let me tell you, Mr. Andrew, that we are fighting the biggest war on land, and we succeeded in defeating all those who were challenging the entire global peace, and especially humanity was their ultimate target. So yes, every Pakistani is very much concerned, but let me assure you that for global peace, Pakistan has always played a pivotal role, and we are committed, and we believe that every civilized nation and every civilized human, it is our fundamental responsibility to play a positive role in somehow bringing peace for the entire globe.
It's absolutely important that Pakistan is at the heart of the movement for peace in the region, a region that has for too long been dogged by terrorism. And as I said in opening, our condolences and thoughts are with the families and friends of all those that were affected by that brutal terrorist attack on Pakistani soil. I wonder if I can just touch on this, because I do think it's important, and we'll come into more detail later on the issue of religious tolerance in Pakistan. But before we went on air, you were telling me, Mr. Afridi, that you were educated in a Christian school. And as it is almost the period of Christmas, it's an important reminder of the links between both the Christian faith and the Muslim faith, but also the importance of religious tolerance and understanding, mutual understanding between the Abrahamic faiths in particular, but also all faiths. And I just wondered if you wanted to touch on that briefly.
Well, I come from the south of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. And when you talk of the south, it means North Waziristan, South Waziristan, Kuram Agency, Orakzai Agency, Dar Adam Khel, FR Peshawar, FR Quat, FR Lucky, Tang, DI Khan. And general perception about the south of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa or Khyber Pakhtunkhwa or former FATA is not very positive. It has been perceived the other way around. And Mr. Andrew, imagine 50 years ago, our forefathers allowed a missionary school to become a part of that society, and I am a product of that institution. The name of that institution is St. Joseph Convent High School. It's a Catholic church. That father, the nuns, I lived with them. We used to celebrate Christmas. We used to celebrate Easters, and imagine the festivity. And let me assure you that even now today, that society or that area which has been misperceived, still the role of that Catholic Church is deep-rooted. The father, the nuns are equally valued. So our society as a whole is very pragmatic, but unfortunately what we observe and we have witnessed, that overall perception has not been very positive. So Mr. Andrew, just want to remind you, and through you I want to reach out to the entire key stakeholders of this globe and all the key decision makers, that never ever misperceive anyone. And they say seeing is believing. So, and every Muslim across the globe, if he or she doesn't believe in Bible, in Jesus, in Mary, he's not a Muslim. So imagine the sort of mutual bondage and understanding between Christianity, Islam, and even Zionism. If someone doesn't believe in Moses, if somebody doesn't believe in Torah, he's not a Muslim. So we need to understand, unfortunately, those who wanted to somehow undermine Islam, they portrayed a very different picture of Islam. That's why overall misperception emerged at all levels. So, Mr. Andrew, looking forward for a very praying that this Christmas will bring peace, harmony for the entire humanity, and we all will cherish our futures in such a manner which humanity will be valued, and no one will be ever undermined on the basis of religion, color, creed, or background.
Inshallah. I can support you in what you say there, and there is much more that unites us than divides us, particularly in the three Abrahamic faiths that you mentioned. Now, if we can move on to the issue of Kashmir, of course, you're the chairman of the Kashmir Committee in the Pakistan National Assembly. Listeners might not be aware of what that is or what it does. So can you perhaps outline briefly what the role of the committee is?
Well, Kashmir Committee, Parliamentary Committee, Special Parliamentary Committee on Kashmir, I am its 8th chairman. The sole objective of this committee was that both the houses, when we talk of the parliament, both the houses, upper and lower, Senate and National Assembly, it has 28 members, and the sole objective of this committee is to play a bridging role between the Parliament and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, as well as the Chief Executive. These parliamentarians give recommendations, and on the basis of those recommendations, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, they come up with different policies through which the ultimate objective is to achieve the desired objective in a very proactive and pro-diplomatic manner. And it doesn't stop here. Another responsibility of this committee is to reach out to all the parliament across the globe, and through parliamentary democracy, because we have got a parliamentary form of government here in Pakistan, through parliamentary democracy, engaging all the key stakeholders, political parties, parliamentarians, friendship groups, caucuses, and then human rights organizations, civil society, and then to come up with an approach where Kashmir, because when we talk of Kashmir, we should not be restricting it to any religion or only to South Asia. When we talk of Kashmir, it means we are talking about humanity. So the whole globe needs to know that it's not about one religion or any group of people. It's about an area where humans are living, and these humans are given a commitment by UN that it will be resolved through plebiscite, and they will be given an opportunity where they will decide for their future and for their coming generations, and something which can benefit them and make them realize that they are as human as the rest of the world. So the role of the Kashmir Committee is to do the needful at the highest level, so that the world somehow can get rid of this issue which is haunting the global peace.
Absolutely. Now, you've served for some time now in different ministerial roles. Can I ask you, how does Imran Khan's government plan to resolve the issue of Kashmir and achieve long-standing peace in the region? What's the plan?
Well, my Prime Minister's sole objective is that since we are living in a world where world has become a global village, and every stakeholder of this globe needs to be given respect, and equality is something which cannot be compromised, and on the basis of mutual respect we can prosperous as humans, and the whole world can become a place worth living, and where everyone can cherish anything related to their beliefs and anything you can ever think of. So my Prime Minister believes in one thing, and that is which is the commitment of UN, plebiscite, right to self-determination, and for this all those resolutions which were committed, and still it stand. It is very much even when the Secretary General of UN, when he was here last year in Pakistan, these commitments of UN still stands, and now the world needs to come forward, especially UN the key stakeholders of UN, permanent members of Security Council, the prosperous world need to realize that if we want to see the entire globe in something which can benefit the entire global community, then this issue which is haunting the global peace, when we talk of global peace, Mr. Andrew, you need to know that when we talk of South Asia, half of the world population lives, if you include Russia, and 4 countries have got nuclear power, nuclear deterrence: China, India, Pakistan, and Russia. So Kashmir issue is something which needs to be addressed on priority basis, and that's what my Prime Minister endorsed in UN twice, and that's what he has been emphasizing, and he tried his level best to reach out to every stakeholder to make them realize that this issue is something which needs the attention of all.
Thank you. And we'll touch on some of those issues later on in a bit more detail. Just want to finish this section talking about the likelihood of a peaceful resolution to the Kashmir issue. It seems very distant now. So how realistic do you think that we can find a way forward in the not too distant future?
Well, Mr. Andrew, one thing which we all need to understand and we need to emphasize on is that the people living in illegal Indian occupied Kashmir, Jammu Kashmir, Ladakh and Gilgit-Baltistan, it was a commitment by UN, one. Second, they are not the children of a lesser God. They are as human as anyone else, and they need to be valued. They need to be given respect. Unfortunately, since 174 years, Kashmiris are going through pain and agony. So the ultimate solution is obviously that this region, South Asia, India and Pakistan, and then all the key stakeholders need to come forward, and it is basically not up to Pakistan, India to decide the fate of Kashmiris. Let them decide, and it is because it is not a bilateral issue, it is a multilateral issue, international armed conflict. It is the biggest militarized zone, and then humanitarian crises are taking place and war crimes are being committed because 900,000 troops are deployed there. So I believe we are neither against the people of India, we are neither against anyone. All we want a peaceful settlement so that these Kashmiris can live according to their own will and wish. And I believe it is again up to the prosperous world. They need to intervene for the sake of global peace.
And I'd like to explore some of that in more detail, if I may, touching firstly on Britain's role, and if you think that we have one, the role of the international community, including the United Kingdom, might be. Now, last week with the president of AJK, I touched on Britain's role in dividing the subcontinent into the 2 new dominions at the end of empire, providing also the princely states, of which Kashmir was one, the choice to join either of the dominions or to retain their sovereignty. That was the root cause of this 7-decade crisis. Now, given that, does Britain have any role to play in brokering a way for Pakistan, India and Kashmiris to enter into some form of meaningful dialogue? Can Britain be an honest broker given our history in the region?
Well, Mr. Andrew, as a student of international politics, I've studied British history, starting it from 1688, Glorious Revolution, and what your nation, what they have witnessed and where they are. I believe it is an incomplete agenda of 1947. UK has a huge role to play, and millions of people have suffered in every way. Humanity has bleeded at all levels. Children, women, you name it, and Kashmiris have gone through all sorts of pain and agony. So I believe it is the fundamental right of UK, of all the political parties, all the key stakeholders of your motherland. They need to come forward, and they need to make the whole globe realize that as a colonial power, what these Kashmiris have witnessed, what this region has witnessed since 1947. I believe enough is enough. You need to come forward, and on war footings, this issue needs to be addressed, because again, it is not about any religion, it's about humanity. And I believe the way these Kashmiri diaspora has been contributing for your motherland, the way their role has been exemplary at all levels. So it is now obligatory on United Kingdom to come forward, play a bridging role, proactive role, and use all means to resolve this issue on priority basis.
And on that, what can British parliamentarians do to help bring this issue up the agenda with the Foreign and Commonwealth Office?
Well, as we all know, that the role of the Parliament is a key, and parliamentarians, elected drafts, they are the ones who understand the pulse, and anything on ground, they are the ones who understand it much, much better than anyone else. So I believe that parliamentarians, political party, the role of the Parliament is again the key. All these, because when you talk of human rights, when we talk of anything related to humanity and anything related to the prosperity of humans as a whole, because as legislators, we are the movers and shakers. So I believe the role in parliamentary democracy of your parliament, of your prime minister, your cabinet, these caucuses, friendship groups, and then these standing committees and backbench committee, because I visited your parliament. We had a very detailed interaction, very fruitful interaction. So because British role is something which needs to be valued, because the entire globe is one way or the other very much interlinked with your country, and any vibe from your country will have a very, very positive message to all the key stakeholders. As a Commonwealth, when we talk of Commonwealth, again, that issue is something which is pending and due since 74 long years. So I believe as a human, not as a chairman Kashmir committee, as a human, as one of a stakeholder, and as a father, I would request your key decision makers, for the sake of humanity, for the sake of global peace, and for our coming generations, and for the sake of the overall credibility of the parliamentarians and of the Parliament, this issue needs to be addressed. Because when we see in the recent past what went wrong with League of Nations, why League of Nations failed miserably, and why Versailles Treaty, when after Versailles Treaty, all those post-Versailles Treaty actions ultimately became the main reason for the failure of League of Nations. So I believe there are a lot of question mark on UN, a lot of question mark on the key stakeholders, the prosperous world, and as a Parliament, and as your motherland, as United Kingdom, which is basically every Pakistani and every Kashmiri, you name any individual from any background, will obviously raise a lot of questions because regarding UK. So the UK has to come forward and do something constructive for global peace and for those people who are living a life which is something needs the attention of all those who matter the most.
Now, you've mentioned the involvement of the United Nations, and of course they've had an interest in this issue almost from the start of the independence of Pakistan and India. It's demanded peace, dialogue, plebiscites, and has tabled all kinds of resolutions to determine the future status of Kashmir. Now, I'm interested in your view as chairman of the Parliamentary Committee on Kashmir. Do you think the UN has failed in its mission?
Well, so far, yes. It is because the commitment was given in 1948. And who took it? India took it. And since then, what the entire globe has witnessed, we have fought a lot of wars. And now, after nuclear deterrence, Kashmir has become a flashpoint. The world needs to realize that anyone living in London, in Paris, in Washington, in Ottawa, Toronto, in Brussels, in any nook and corner of the globe, even in Sydney, in Christchurch, you name any country, any city across the globe, they need to realize that the after effects of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, it is still very much haunting all those who are living there. So God forbid, God forbid, God forbid, this present fascist government of India, Modi, which has polarized Indians at all levels, the way they are mistreating minorities and the way they are bullying Kashmiris, these draconian laws. Imagine in today's world that they have come up with an approach which is known as Ghar Wapsi program, come back home, where they are telling minorities to convert, to become Hindus. Otherwise, they have no place for them in India. And the way they are, in the name of cow slaughtering, they are killing innocent Muslims and then forcibly converting Christian Muslim into Hindus. And then Citizenship Amendment Act, then UAPA, one single tweet can throw you behind the bars. And then another area is this demographic terrorism which is taking place, revoking of 35A and 370 from Indian Constitution, where they are challenging UN and they are conveying message to UN and to all the stakeholders that UN stands nothing for them, and international commitments have been totally bulldozed. So I believe UN has to come forward and need to step in such a manner so the overall confidence of the third world or all those who are going through pain and agony can be restored. So the world, we usually as a student and as a parliamentarian, as one of the stakeholder, we are usually told by our elders and those who are our mentors and inspirations and legends, they keep on telling us to learn from our history, and history is constantly reminding us that we need to learn from the failure of League of Nations. So UN need to be more committed now. And unfortunately, what we have witnessed it, that if you are the second largest market, if you are the largest democratic country, and if you are the largest secular, so-called secular state, then you are entitled to take decisions according to your own will and wish. Which sort of messaging is this? Which sort of approach is this? So a line needs to be drawn by UN where they need to be conveying a message that nothing on earth in any way, in any capacity can challenge anything which is haunting humanity. So I believe a huge role of UN is expected and they need to come forward. That's what my Prime Minister has constantly been conveying, and even in those two UNGA speeches, he requested that for the sake of global peace, the role of UN, and it is the onus is on UN now. They need to come forward, and if they're unable to deliver, God forbid, God forbid, God forbid, the world can altogether be taken to a level, because this expansionist fascist approach of Modi and the way they are haunting this region. A classic example is of Nepal, is of Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, recently what happened in Ladakh with China, and what is happening in Kashmir. These issues need the attention of UN. And when we talk of human rights, when we talk of women, when we talk of children, and then the way...
If I can, sorry to interrupt you, but we've got a lot to get through, and we will touch on some of these issues later on. I'm just interested now on what needs to happen to be able to bring both India and Pakistan to the table for that dialogue and to get that roadmap for a peaceful settlement. Now, I can remember the surprise and the delight of the international community when Israel and the PLO were brought together at the Oslo Accords. And indeed, in a similar way, when the Clinton administration, through Senator George Mitchell, brought the British government to the table with Sinn Féin and known members of the Irish Republican Army, which ultimately resulted in an unthinkable peace process and power sharing. Now, do you think there is a role for an international arbiter along the Norway or US examples that I've just cited for Kashmir?
Well, Andrew, they say that as long as you have a will, trust me, anything is doable. And the global key stakeholders of this globe needs to understand it's not about the people of Kashmir, it's about the global peace. And the dialogue between Pakistan and India, and then I initially mentioned that it's not a bilateral issue, it's a multilateral issue. And the third most important party is the people of Kashmir. They need to be represented. And then India needs to go back prior to 5th of August 2019. And then my Prime Minister and government of Pakistan has conveyed it in very clear terms that go back prior to 5th August 2019. And then the first and foremost thing on the agenda will be Kashmir. And the people of Kashmir, they will be very much part of that dialogue. And I believe the role of the prosperous world, of US, of UK, the permanent members of Security Council is again something which will be cherished. And it's not, again, it's for their benefit. It's for global peace. It's for our coming generations. So we are not, as I said earlier, we are not against the people of India. We want a peaceful region where we need to fight against poverty, illiteracy. Let's resolve these issues because humanity is suffering at different levels. If you go to any city of India and even in Pakistan or in this region, what is happening in Afghanistan? So this region needs an approach where humanity should be given more respect and human dignity needs to be priority number one. So post 5th August 2019, India needs to go back and the key stakeholder of the globe needs to come forward. We are willing to discuss and willing to resolve as per the commitment of UN.
Thank you. And of course, as part of that roadmap to peace, there would inevitably be a discussion on a future plebiscite on the status of Kashmir. That's long been a position of the United Nations. Now, irrespective of your own thoughts on the sovereignty issue, you must recognise that there is a body of opinion supporting Kashmir independence. Would you accept that as an option in any ballot?
Andrew, as I said earlier, it's not about India and Pakistan to decide. Let them decide. They have gone through, they are making sacrifices since 174 years. Who am I to give my opinion on that? Let them decide. It is up to them. It's about their future. Let them decide, and whatever their decision is, it will be obligatory.
Thank you. That was very clear. Now, we are all sadly too aware of the ongoing issues facing the civilian population across the line of control in Indian-administered Kashmir, where there has been a communications block, a full military lockdown, and basic rights have been denied since mid-2019. What representations are being made to the Indian government to try and resolve the situation? And do you think that normality, whatever that means, on the Indian side of the line of control can be restored anytime soon to the civilian population?
I wish they could have learned from COVID. COVID, which has haunted the entire globe. Imagine the way this fascist government has treated the people of Kashmir, and all the Indians had to go through lot of pain and agony, and that was an opportunity for Modi to revisit his approach, and somehow sanity could have prevailed. But what we have been witnessing, what we hear, this UAPA law, and then the way they are targeting all those who are one or the other responsible for giving any sort of voice to these miseries, journalists, people from media, They have been targeted, they have been humiliated, and they have been, for no rhyme and reason, have been thrown behind bars. So I believe that at this particular juncture, again, my Prime Minister, let me remind you, my Prime Minister requested Prime Minister Modi that Pakistan is willing to cooperate, because that initiative of our SARS program, where we provided 220 billion rupees to those who are living below poverty line. Because when you go for lockdown, imagine in your country you have got a system, you're as a welfare state, you have got all the due data of all those who are, for example, of the laborers, but living in a third world where you don't have the relevant data. So we offered Indians that we are willing to assist and help them in any capacity, but that was bluntly refused. What I, again, as one of the stakeholder, I would emphasize on one point, that when we go and do research on RSS, on Hindutva, one thing comes to the limelight, that they have their own interest, and that interest revolves around one thing: Mahabharat, Greater India, where they want to convert India into a Hindu state, and for them minorities stand nowhere, and neighbors neighbors mean nothing to them. Interfering in their affairs is something which they cherish. EU Disinfo Lab has exposed them since 15 years what they have been doing. 750 these different information cells were created, where they pressurized UN and marginalized and succeeded in somehow in isolating Pakistan. All these approaches of them, and then those dossiers which we had given to UN, while mentioning their involvement of all sorts of terrorism in Balochistan in form of Fatah, and they are constantly violating a line of control, targeting innocent people, children, and even ambulances were targeted. So imagine. So I believe a brave initiative is only expected from whom? From the prosperous world, from UN. And they need to engage India and Pakistan in such a manner, because when we talk of Human Rights Committee report of 2018-19 and 19-20, both the countries, India and Pakistan, were supposed to allow observers to visit illegal Indian occupied Kashmir and Azad Kashmir. Why India is not cooperating? Why political parties, Indian political party leaders were not allowed to visit illegal Indian occupied Kashmir? Why they are behind the bar, they are restricted to their houses since 500 days. Since 500 days. Imagine the agony of those children. Imagine the agony of those parents, the old age people. Imagine what the children who are supposed to attend schools, they are being deprived of everything. And then RSS extremists are moving openly, and then demographic terrorism which is taking place, their lands have been taken away from them. And then tourism, the main source of income of illegal Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir was tourism. Their culture has been taken away. They are deprived of everything. So in such scenario, I can only request only those and the prosperous world, the UN, and anyone on the face of the earth who can become a voice for the unheard, to come forward and make Indian realize, because these policies are polarizing India. And this approach.
Can I ask you on the human rights issue? Now, I remember only too vividly, sadly, on a visit to Kashmir, seeing an image of a young child, maybe only 3 years of age, who had pellet marks all over his body. Absolutely awful, horrific images. And we know that the UN has reported time and time again some quite serious breaches in basic human rights. Can I ask bluntly, and I want a brief answer if possible, but can I ask you, do you think that diplomacy has failed the Kashmiri people?
Well, I believe the big powers, the prosperous world is responsible. And had it been anything, when we talk of human rights, anything in any capacity, when it is associated with Pakistan, the global perception is altogether different. But these horrific scenes, these atrocities, pellet guns through which the children, people of all age group, the way they are being targeted. And then when we talk of half widows, imagine a wife is not even aware of her husband for decades, whether he is alive or not. Then the way those concentration camps, where thousands of children have been thrown behind these concentration camps, and where the sole objective is to work on their brain. And then prisoner of conscience, where, for example, Asi Andarabi, Qasim Fattu, lot of political leaders are thrown behind bars, and they are behind bars since more than 28, 29 years. And then political leaders, they have been restricted to their houses. And then on top of that, what we usually hear, that mass rape and mass graves, it is something which you cannot associate with anything, anything with humanity. These barbaric approaches and this unhuman approach of Modi and its government is now constantly giving vibes to the third world countries, that anyone who doesn't have a huge market, anyone who doesn't have anything at any highest level, they have no right to live in this world. So I believe, are we still waiting for those horrific scenes? For example, when that child, that baby lying dead on the beach, when these refugees wanted to migrate to Europe, are we still waiting for such scenes? And imagine the same picture was shown to the entire globe when in illegal Indian occupied Kashmir, a grandson was sitting on the chest of his lying grandfather. And I believe when the whole world is constantly telling us to be more civilized and give right to women, women empowerment is the order of the day, sustainable development goal is something which you cannot compromise on, coming up with a lot of initiatives. But what we witness in illegal Indian occupied or in India, the way Christians, Muslim, and the way they are converting mosques into temples, nobody's taking any action at the highest level. And this what create radicalization, this what polarize humanity, this what create misunderstanding. So I believe for global peace and for all those images and scenes which we have been witnessing of late, the world needs to come forward. The civil society, human rights activists, organizations, all the key stakeholders of this globe need to realize, as a father, imagine, as we all are humans, we have our loved ones. What happened to George Floyd in US, the whole US came out in support of George Floyd. Similarly, when we talk of Iraq, the whole UK came out on the road. So the world needs to know that, please, it's not about only one religion or all those people who belong to any faith or any background. It's about humanity. And when humanity is bleeding, and if someone remains silent, he or she has a main role in that. And as a silent observer, if they're unable to play a pivotal role, Mr. Andrew, I'm afraid what Europe has witnessed, those horrific scenes during dark ages, are we heading, God forbid, towards the same more or less same
Now, Mr. Afridi, you cannot call out human rights abuses on the one hand and turn a blind eye to them on the other. Of course, there are human rights reports of human rights abuses in both Pakistan and in Pakistan-administered Kashmir too. Don't want to get into a debate about whose abuses are worse, but what are you doing as a member of the National Assembly to challenge the perpetrators of those attacks on freedom of expression, of religion, and of political freedoms in Pakistani-administered Kashmir and in Pakistan as well?
This present government in 2000 2018 came up with a new visa policy where more than 180 countries can apply online visa. From 66 to, we have raised it to 99 business visas, 50 countries on arrival visa, no restriction, no NOC. We are inviting, we are constantly, I'm requesting you, through you, I want to convey it to all those who want to come and visit Azad Kashmir, all the 10 districts. Come and see it for yourself. Seeing is believing. And every believer of any religion, Kartar Pura for these 6. And religious tourism, my Prime Minister and this government is giving more importance to religious tourism. And when we talk of Hindus, as I said, I come from a missionary school. Unfortunately, the way Pakistan was perceived, it was basically because that propaganda through which we were undermined. So I don't want to go into details, and let me request you to come, visit, interact with all the stakeholders. And as I said earlier, that if somebody is a nationalist from any background, if they have any sort of approach towards the resolution of Kashmir, we are valuing them. So please never ever compare Azad Kashmir with illegal Indian occupied Kashmir. They've got their own government, legislative assembly, elections usually take place. They've got their own prime minister. They are entitled to take their own decisions. And then we have got a refugee camps in Azad Kashmir, where more than 42,000, and as a whole in Pakistan, we have got more than 1 million Kashmiris from illegal Indian occupied Kashmir who have been forced to leave Jammu and Kashmir. So I believe the right approach would be, I request you, and through you, all those who have anything related to interfaith harmony or any reservations or misperception, come and see it for yourself.
I'd be more than happy to. Now, in the last few minutes before, and this is sadly going to have to be a brief section because we do want to bring in people's questions, I do want to touch on something that does succeed in bringing all sides together where politics and diplomacy often fails, and that's sport and culture. Now, we heard in the UK of the establishment of the Cricket Kashmir Premier League last week. What is this project and what are its aims and objectives?
Well, sport is something which play a pivotal role in bringing people together, and we have taken a lot of initiatives, and under cultural front, this initiative, we are giving more emphasis to sports, and cricket is followed like a religion in this region in South Asia, whether India, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Pakistan, even Afghanistan has started doing wonders in cricket. So Kashmir Premier League, it has got 6 teams, 1 overseas warriors, and the other 5 teams where they will have an opportunity to excel, to make an impact. Their culture, their heritage, their values, their overall resilience and professional skills will be highlighted, and they will, because foreign players will be part of this particular event, and they will interact and they will learn a lot of positive things, because sharing dressing room, sharing a lot of things related to sports that will bring positivity and youth engagement. The youth of this particular Azad Kashmir will have an opportunity to make an impact at highest level, and positive vibes will be given. Tourism and then their overall approach will be valued, and then all those who have anything related to Azad Kashmir's misperception, when they come and see it with their own eyes, they will become ambassadors of Kashmir, and then they will highlight anything related to Kashmir in that world where misperception is unfortunately the order of the day. So no, Kashmir Premier League is something which we value. My Prime Minister and K has become a buzzword now. Basically, the aim of KPL is to bring Kashmiri people on the global map of sports.
And that is great, and we wish it every success. And of course, I'm very fortunate to have visited Kashmir and Pakistan, and indeed I've visited India too. And you know, it is a beautiful part of the world. Kashmir in particular, I liken to the Garden of Eden. If there was ever any part of the globe where you could pinpoint God's vision for the Garden of Eden, it has to be Kashmir, which is just absolutely beautiful. And
it's the heaven on earth.
So absolutely, and with such a distinct culture as well, and hopefully we can help promote some of that unique Kashmiri culture around the world. Now, if I may, Mr. Afridi, I want to bring in very briefly some of the questions which we've received online. And the first one is from Wasim Ali. Do you think there are double standards from the international community when it comes to Kashmir?
Well, double standard, calling it double standard will be very crude, but let me, as a normal approach, they have never ever given due importance to Kashmir. And unfortunately, Indian cloud, because now the whole world has seen the real face of India. So the clout of India was something under which Kashmiri had to go through pain and agony. The world needs to be more serious now, because this particular question speaks in high volumes for all those who are a part of this region. So the world needs to start taking these questions seriously now.
Thank you. Do we have another question? Oh. From Gaz Khan, human rights violations is an international issue. I think that's something that we've touched on in our conversation, and we are agreed, but absolutely, there is a role there for the international community to come together, isn't there, Mr. Afridi?
Very true. This entire globe will become meaningless without humans. So humans add more value to this universe. And without humanity and without anything related to humans, nothing on earth will be cherishable. So I believe human right is something which cannot be compromised upon. And every human on the face of the earth, from any background, needs to be cherished. This is what we believe in, and every religion believes in. And this is what the UN Charter believes in. You name it, you name any constitution of any country, any political party manifesto or ideology, any society, they all believe in one thing, that humanity comes first.
Absolutely. And we've got another question from Sadi Ansari. Both India and Pakistan should first withdraw all military from Jammu Kashmir territory and then let the principal party, the people of Jammu and Kashmir, decide the future.
The sole objective of all of us is that the UN had given its commitment. It is up to UN, because both the parties agreed to that. And now UN need to come forward and resolve it. And yes, I emphasize, it is basically the people of Kashmir who will decide their fate.
Absolutely. And no decision about me without me is the important underlying message, that ultimately sovereignty, that basic human right, the most fundamental of all human rights, is to be able to decide by whom you are governed and how you are governed. And that ultimately is for the people of Kashmir to decide. I couldn't agree with you more, Mr. Afridi. Now, I'm very sorry, but our time has ended. I'd like to thank my special guest, Shehryar Khan Afridi, for being with us on tonight's LFK Chairman's Conversation webinar. And to yet again thank my team, especially Wasim Zafar and Wajid Khan, for making it happen. I hope you, the viewers, have enjoyed it. Now, please keep tuned in for our next programme, which will be early in the new year. Keep an eye out for the date and time, and we hope to have another very special guest with us. It will be live streamed like tonight on the LFK YouTube and Facebook accounts. But from me, Andrew Gwynne, and from the whole team at Labour Friends of Kashmir, a very Merry Christmas and best wishes for 2021. Good night and thank you for watching.